Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the April 4th meeting of the Economic Development Commission. Welcome to spring. I will begin the meeting with the approval of the draft minutes of the March 7th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any comments, corrections, or proposed deletions or anything? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Do we have anybody on?
Ben is on.
Oh, Ben. Morning, Ben. Morning. You're on mute.
Nope,
No, he's not. We can hear.
Okay. I couldn't hear. And I'm right next to you. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. All right, so before we jump into our reports, I want to, I guess, take a matter of personal privilege to share something with you and to recognize somebody who's with us this morning, and that is Mr. Eaton. This will be Everett's last meeting. He has been on this commission for 25 years.
Wow.
Ouch.
Including serving 10 years as its chair. And obviously, he's been on longer than anybody else in the room here. I've asked the person who has been on it the longest with Everett to share a couple comments, so I'll call on Bob to,
I'm the old guy.
the old guy.
That's good. Yeah, I spent a lot of time on the commission with Everett, and was fortunate enough to, I think I was vice chair and you were chair, and so learned a lot from Everett in terms of how we operate and how to run a meeting. So I appreciate that. Everett and I actually went to high school together and college. And we both ended up in Portsmouth. Probably live, I don't know, a couple hundred yards away from each other.
Wow.
So, and we're here.
String theory.
And now he's leaving, and we'll be sad about that. But you had a great tenure, and a lot of it had to do with parking, which I know you really enjoyed. I think that ultimately drove you out of the chairmanship. So.
Well, if it weren't for a bloody coup, I'd still be in power.
True.
Everett's still standing, so we know how that ended up.
Yeah.
The reign of terror.
I don't know how long the parking garage went on. It had to have been like almost 10 years, right? It was, and it kept, there were different iterations, and we'd do a bunch of work, and then things would change, and you'd have to regroup, and so it was quite a process.
To pick up on what Bob said about parking, you know, it really, for those who weren't on the commission or maybe weren't watching intently, although some of them probably were catching up on it, it was, you know, it consumed us for those 10 years and probably before and after. And I was really proud of the work the EDC did. We advocated for 4 different locations, one of them twice, and we were helpful in getting bonding, I think, at least 2 times. If anyone ever wants the unabridged version about where it went and how and why, I'm happy to share it. And it was and it was painful for everybody, painful for the city to keep going through those gyrations and not to come away with any solution or resolution for the parking problem. You know, especially when you think about pre-pandemic, and we were 700 spots short, and it was really a real problem for the city. But, you know, the EDC really, you know, carried the torch for the city to, you know, find, you know, we went through an exhaustive study and looked at 21 different sites at the end. You know, and would work through, we had we weighted all of the sites, you know, for various merits and came away with the Foundry Garage, the last one. And in the other studies, you know, the other times we went, you know, we were at the Wailing Wall site twice. We had it bonded one time. And the second time around, the city council said that because we'd lost, we thought we had all the votes at city council to have it all approved. And at the last minute, you know, there were 100-odd people that came and spoke against it. who were supportive of one particular retailer there, and who wasn't in business within, a year later. Yeah, kind of, sad for everyone, frankly, and, all that work went to waste, and we moved to another site, and moved to the Sheridan lot, had that, I don't know if we get it bonded or not, but then there was a lawsuit, and we lost that, and we were at Port Walk. The city was going to own 2 levels, or going to run 2 levels of underground parking, and own one of the 2, and the developer would own the other one. We had that, I think we had that bonded. And then, the financial crisis of 08 to 010, someplace in there was taking place, and they couldn't get financing for the construction, so that died. We moved back to the Wailing Wall. Yeah, the first time, actually, we had it approved, the Wailing Wall, moved because we thought the Sheridan site was better, went back to the Wailing Wall, lost because of the neighbor, went back to the drawing board again. So it was really, I really sharpened my public speaking skills going before city council, on bended knee, trying to get another site, advocate for the site. So, yeah, it was quite a journey. I thought EDC did really good work in helping support the city in terms of, providing, at the end of the day, I was really, pleased that I thought EDC and the city did a nice job of holding people, the residents' property taxes in check. And it was, in not any small part, I think, to the work EDC did and collaborating with the Chamber of Commerce and other partners. And I thought we did some really good work. So, I'll be watching. I'm sure you'll continue to do great work. So, thank you.
He'll be up at 7:30 in the morning to watch.
I'll be watching just to be sure you're following Robert's rules.
Thank you, Everett.
This is great. Well, I was just reflecting on this yesterday evening, and we realized with his 25 years of service, he's been a member of this commission for the equivalent of 1/16 of the history of Portsmouth. Wow. Just think about that. And it's not like he's done nothing else with his life. I was talking with him early in the week, and he was explaining he had a long term as on the board of the Portsmouth Economic Development Loan Program. You're on the Prescott Park Arts Festival for a term. Guess you're on the board of the Rotary for 2 terms of 5 years each. And this whole thing started when you were back on what was then called the Greater Portsmouth Chamber of Commerce board. So Everett's given a lot to this community, so really appreciate it. I have taken the liberty of getting a little memento to give to him.
Wow.
I hope you don't have this in your library.
I don't.
I'm going to pass it around, and you can just leave a note if you wish.
Yeah.
And I'll also share with you that on Monday night, the mayor will be reading a proclamation in favor of Everett at the outset of the meeting, right?
I believe so.
Yes, it's at the start.
Nice.
We won't make you wait.
Would you take care of moving that on the agenda? So if any of you want to be there, you're welcome to do that. Here's Phil. Good morning, Phil. Phil, we were just recognizing Everett because today is his last meeting after 25 years. And we're about ready to wrap it up. I know you were on the board, on the commission here with him for a long time. If you'd like to add a few words, you're welcome to do that.
I just would add that probably to what's already been said, but Everett's been just a steadfast advocate for the city in a host of ways. I know parking seems to have been the hot topic for probably the better part of those 2.5 decades, but it's just an incredible run in your advice and just willingness to speak up and always on behalf of whatever was most prudent for the broader community is much appreciated, and it's a lot of service and a lot of early mornings and a lot of Friday hours, but it's been a pleasure being part of this group with you over those years, and hopefully we can continue the legacy that you started, and we'll miss having you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I'm sure it screams out, what happened to term limits, right?
Well, I think you're the reason we have a term, which I think is a good thing, but, all right, well, we're passing that around. Let's move on to our reports, starting with Sean.
Great, good morning. Just a couple of updates from our last meeting. I talked about the issues that Coast was having. They continue to have issues, but they are planning, along with Ben and the city, a meeting with some local businesses to talk about additional funding. It's not a public meeting, it's something they're putting together, but we are certainly, as the city, supportive of them reaching out to businesses for additional financial support to keep the services in place. Another project Ben and I are working on, I'll steal all your thunder, Ben, is a meeting in the West End with West End small businesses to introduce them to the rail trail and how they might leverage that and reach out to trail riders. More to come on that. We're going to start in the West End, and then over time, we'll be providing resources to all the businesses in town that want to engage with trail riders. Outdoor dining, we have 17 applications in place. Many of the usual suspects, shouldn't say it like that, many of our repeat customers. The ordinance really hasn't changed, so it's just a matter of working through getting the designs and making sure that we can turn those as quickly as possible.
When is the deadline for applications?
I don't think there
Is
is one.
I don't
17
think
as
there's
high
a
as
deadline.
we
It started April 1st. No, it started before that. It started in March, and
Well,
then
when does it open? It opened,
opens
May
May.
1st.
no, but I mean, the applications open March.
They opened in early March.
Yeah.
March.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Then
in
it's
a
just
month we
open.
got 17. Okay.
yeah. They don't really close per se. Just for FYI, the Pierce Island Public Art is now actually at the process where it's being fabricated. That's going to be the large golden spiral that you can walk into and engage with. That comes from the Percent for Art for the wastewater treatment plant. The goal is to have that in place by the summer. We'll see how that goes. And lastly, I made copies of the article from the Portsmouth Herald this morning listing all the city's construction projects. So a reminder to this group, if you really want to follow them and you want information pushed to you every week by email, you can sign up for the updates by project. And construction season begins on Monday. Just a personal note, I'll be out of the country, AKA incommunicado, starting on Tuesday to the following Tuesday. So,
Can you give us an update on the Market Square master plan?
I don't think there's been a final presentation to City Council, so it hasn't changed since the last month.
Okay. Will something be issued before then, or will it just go to the City Council?
They
I believe
circulated an
it's-
edited PowerPoint. After the meeting,
Yeah, have you seen
We had-
one from that? I have
there
not.
were, there were suggestions that were thrown out, and then we
Edits.
didn't get just some small edits to it. We didn't get a PowerPoint, and maybe a week or so later, they
One just
circulated one that had those. little
Okay, so it
edits.
sounds like the final edits have been made through the advisory group and others. So I think it's really just due to go to City Council.
It is, yeah.
I think so,
I
yeah.
don't know if it's on,
It's not on this agenda.
it's not on Monday's
I
agenda.
I think from my foggy 7:45 memory, that it is, I think we will see it in like May, June, is when, at least like presented to the council, not final council vote. I think there was like in June-ish time, and then,
And when that happens, there'll be a room for public comment
Correct.
because it'll be on the agenda. Yeah, so it looks like not happening this month.
no.
Okay.
I don't anticipate it on the agenda this month.
Can you give us any previews of coming attractions on what?
I think, like Ann said, there wasn't too much change because why can't I think of the consultant. I'm just not. The consultant did a really great job of taking all of the information, and especially from the public session at the library with the committee, and the feedback that they've just heard. They've been really good about like looking at watching comments from city council meetings and getting public comments. So just a little bit of there are some tweaks of conversations of like where are we going to plant some trees? There's been the big back and forth conversation also at city council of where is the line of the city's input financially on some more public round table seating versus the investment of the private sector. I'll discuss that in our city council update. But it's like Ann said, it's very much like that draft that we all saw, I think, like a month ago.
Yeah, and I would add what you see, what their suggestions are, what they're proposing that you'll see in the PowerPoint eventually doesn't mean that next month there's going to be shovels in the ground.
Correct.
It's just a blueprint so that if something happens, there's a water main break-in on Pleasant Street and they need to dig up Pleasant Street, they can pull this document and say, how should we rebuild Pleasant Street when we put it back together? It's not really like
The Vaughan Mall is a good example that work is going to be starting soon. And in this kind of blueprint, as Ann put it, we're talking about kind of the raised crosswalk. So it's very designed so that you can go from Vaughan Mall straight up Chestnut Street, and looking at kind of pillars like that as Fleet Street that project comes on board to bury the power lines, looking at redoing that. So I assume that it will be a slow, steady rollout of the updates. I like to call it the market plan, Market Square refresh, not change. But there was a lot of analytical data about removing some parking in some locations instead of changing some parallel to pull-in, changing front pull-in to back pull-in, and kind of where we could maybe lose some spots. There was, as we all know, the back and forth of shutting down streets, removable bollards versus fixed bollards versus cost of bollards that we've seen that are automatic up and down. So there's been a lot of good conversations that I think have also triggered good community conversations of, what could happen in that area.
There's a big rethink of the crosswalks at Alley Jewelers,
Yes.
Athenaeum, Market Street. There's a lot of crosswalks all in one place, and there was, and that's almost like it's probably more than a paint job, but I mean, it's laying some sort of surface.
Changing
there.
the surface, the structure,
Changing the
making it more
surface.
visible to
Learning the laws
So
of how
figuring
far
out
back a stop sign has to be.
How to make that crosswalk safer and a little less chaotic with so many.
yeah, better for drivers, better for pedestrians.
So that was rethought, but
A bigger no right turn on.
Well, one of the big things was eliminating the two turn lanes there.
Yeah,
Pleasant onto Congress.
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. And, potentially widening in some of Pleasant so there could be trees on that, because that is a hot spot, gets a lot of sun, and there's very limited. One of the conversations we had a lot was trees and shade space, and creating kind of oasis in the middle of our kind of most dense pavement area. So we'll see what happens.
I don't feel like there's anything wildly controversial. There's no shutting down of streets permanently. There's nothing like that. It's trees and benches and a better fountain. And
Did the original conversation around turning, there was a couple of thoughts about some one-way streets here, that all ended up getting,
I don't feel like that was part
That
of
was
the market.
it was
Are you talking about
temporary.
That was the State
are you talking about
Street.
State Street one way?
Yeah.
So that was an
Different.
initiative from a couple council members that was not really taken into account on this project. This project was solely within kind of Daniel to Congress to Islington, and those, that circle, as I call it.
The last plans that I saw had maybe 3 options for the Pleasant Street area, including the little Chapel Street
They're
alley.
changing that direction.
Okay, so, because I know there were a couple of neighbors who were concerned you were going to close it off. Have they come to a recommendation on that, or are they going to present all options?
I think the plan is to present all options. As I know it now, I don't know what the
Yeah, what
consultant.
I've seen, the slides show 3 options, and then one has a red circle around it
Yeah.
as their recommended. Here's 3 ways we could do it. Here's what the consultant recommends.
Yes. And one of.
And that's a
Still-
change direction one?
I can't remember.
I don't think so.
But one
I
of-
would have to look at the PowerPoint. It's
Yeah.
been a while.
One of the options is the change of direction, because we find, and if you sit downtown, you can see that people don't always know where they're going, and so they end up making this giant loop and congestion if they're, say, trying to go up Route 1 to cross the Memorial Bridge or things like that. So the idea is potentially if we changed that so that you could loop back around, that may, because that street isn't always used, that section of the street. So from like 5 Thai, just that little section of the street. So not changing where the townhomes and row houses are next to the bank, but just that tiny little part next to City Shoes and 5 Thai. But we'll see when they present everything. I think it's going to be great. They also talked to the original Bob in Thorson, and talked to him about some of the things that he would have loved to see that did not get support back then, including bigger fountains, different crosswalks, more trees. So it was really great to be able to speak with him and integrate all of a lot of those ideas that they had then. I think people forget how controversial the original refresh of that in the 70s was.
But there won't be anything in this year's CIP related to that plan, the 2026 CIP.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Besides the projects already in there, like Fleet Street and Vaughan Mall, but nothing that is concrete on this.
I think infrastructure is in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So part of the reason I ask these questions is because when we start talking about the master plan for the city, I'm interested in any feedback of whether we should be advocating for something that's in that Market Square master plan to be
Yeah.
implemented more sooner than later, something of that nature. But I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Other questions of Sean? Okay. Ben, you want to tell us what's going on with the chamber?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but it's good to be with you virtually. A few things to highlight this morning. One, membership is up. It's actually something we've been looking at lately. We took a huge dip during the pandemic, as a lot of organizations did, and been slowly seeing slow and incremental growth since then. But as of right now, we've reached pre-pandemic numbers, and we're kind of the highest membership that we've seen since 2018, and are on a trajectory to surpass all-time highs, at least highs that we have records for in the coming probably 6 to 8 months. So we're really excited about that. I think that speaks volumes to the work that we're doing and the response from the business community to that. A couple other things to just kind of highlight. Restaurant Week is coming up April 10th to the 19th, so all menus have been posted to the website. We have 34, I believe, restaurants participating this time around. Some new ones in there, so there's lots of good options for everyone, and we're very excited about that. Looking a little further ahead, Hit the Decks is May 8th. So that's just a fun one to jot on your calendar to keep track of. And then the last event I'll mention is on the 21st. We have a great presentation on preserving our City of the Open Door legacy with Ann Weidman. So thank you, Ann, for that. So that'll be on the 21st of April. A couple other things just to kind of note. We are in a busy season for tourism, kind of getting prepared for the season to kick off. We're finalizing the official tourism map and the harbor guide, which is a partnership with Big Brown Books, local publisher. So that is coming together quite well. And lastly, the last things I'll mention are a couple policy-related things. This is obviously a very busy time of year on a local level. we are kind of paying attention to the co-living zoning amendments that are making their way from the zoning folks to city council. I'm really excited about some of the opportunity that exists there. And then on a state perspective, we're really tracking the budget. I don't know if people have been tuned into this, but there's some pretty scary stuff in the current version of the state budget, which is currently still sitting in the House Finance Committee. There's a pretty significant cut to the university system of like about $30 million, which will have huge impacts on our neighbors here at UNH. The New Hampshire Council on the Arts is also on the chopping block for funding, and I think we all are aware of the impact of the arts here in Portsmouth and our the economic driver that we are. And then lastly, they added almost a 50% cut to travel and tourism funding, which will be certainly impactful to Portsmouth. There's many other states around the country that have gone down this route of cutting their tourism marketing budget, and it's had pretty dramatic impacts to tax collection and visitation and things like that. So sort of a kind of a bite in the hand that feeds you kind of situation there. And we're going to be really focused on the Senate side of this. When the House gets done with it, it goes to the Senate, and trying to work with our senators to see some of that funding restored, so that we can continue to do the great work that the state is doing and partnering with us locally to promote Portsmouth and to promote New Hampshire as the great travel destination that it is. So that's those are my updates for this morning. Happy to answer any questions anyone has, but I apologize again for not being there in person.
Not a problem. Questions for Ben? Ben, I have one question. There was recently comments in the paper from one of the hotel operators in the city that Canadians were canceling reservations. Are you a Canadian tourist for summer visits? Are you hearing that from any of your other hospitality folks? And if so, do you anticipate being able to do something to counter that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom. Thank you. It is a concern. So I spoke with a few local hoteliers to get a sense for how much of their business comes from Canada. And they shared at different times of year that number fluctuated, but on average it's a 10% number. And that's quite a bit of business, right? So, of that 10%, how many of those folks will decide not to make a trip to the United States this summer because of the relationships between the United States and Canada? I don't have the answer to that. We recently, and this was planned a year ago, before any of this mess was even foreseen, we had made plans to go to a travel show in Montreal. That was about 2 weeks ago. And there was a lot of kind of internal debate amongst communities that were attending that, and even from New Hampshire, about whether that was a good use of our energy. And ultimately, we said we had already paid for it, so why not go and see what it's like? And so we went. And I will tell you that the response was better than I anticipated. I kind of thought we'd get run out of town with some pitchforks kind of scenario, but Canadians are much pretty kind and graceful people, and they were, there was some negativity there. But I'd say on the whole, people said, we may take a year off from coming down to New Hampshire. We may come to New Hampshire and just not post about it or tell anyone. That was an interesting response we heard a few times from folks. We're not going to post any pictures because we don't want our friends and neighbors to see that we're going to the United States. And then there were a few people that said we were absolutely not going, and we don't like the current climate. So I think it will have an impact. Fortunately for us, I think it's going to. I don't think Portsmouth will be super negatively impacted. I think they'll have a greater impact in kind of areas like Hampton that have a lot more extended stay. It's very common for folks from Montreal and Canada to come down and spend a week there. So I think they'll see a bit more of an impact than we will. But it's definitely something we're paying attention to and trying our best to market to.
Great. Thank you. Other questions? Okay. Let's go to our city council reps.
Vince, start it off.
We've only had one meeting since the last EDC meeting, so don't have a lot of things. I guess one of the things that we did have is the Student Government Day, which was really interesting. We had missed that last year, or
You know, we had it. We brought it back 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah. And so it's fascinating to see these young people, how engaged and bright and interesting they are. It was great. It was a great experience. I don't know what else to say
Yeah.
about it, but
Yeah. It's been really cool. Just I think Student Government Day. One of the things that to note is that they don't just sit with City Council; they sit with senior staff too. So they're sitting with the city manager, city attorneys, health department, building department, plumbing inspector, school board, and it's really cool. One of my kids, Miles, this is his third. He's a senior. He's graduating. This is his third year. The third year we've offered it. He's done it every year. So it's been really cool to see some of the kids come back. And then the city council reps make a mock agenda and present ideas and items. And it's really funny because sometimes it is like spend $50 million on an ice skating rink. And then what's really fun is you start to hear the debate from the kids. They're like, well, you want to put this on the band practice field. That's great. Where's the band going to practice now? And so they're kind of looking at, in their world, real world situations. We did have several motions to remove all cars from Market Square. So I do think, again, as we talk about Portsmouth in 50 years, I won't be here, Well, maybe I'll be alive, but in Connor's Cottage. So it's interesting to hear, kind of what they're looking for as they think about going up to college and wanting to return to the place that they grew up in. So it's always a great day. Some of the other quick things to think about, we went over the zoning change. That is really about, it was brought on, as some of you may remember, the treehouse scandal. So we passed the ordinance to change the requirement for fences.
Fences, sheds.
Playhouses.
Yes.
So they can be up to, I think, like 100. For playhouses and sheds, I think it's like 120 square feet, depending on property lot size. There was a little back and forth between, it is worth noting that the council did not accept all of the recommendations from the planning board. I think it's pretty clear, at least to me, hopefully to some other people, that part of what this council's goal is to do is to streamline the everyday citizens process with dealing with City Hall, as in like inspections, trying to understand what needs to go in front of the planning board, what can be administratively approved, things like that, what would have a negative impact on a neighbor and what we see is not having a negative impact on a neighbor or neighborhood. So that passed.
I have a couple of things too.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
the experiment with the front-facing offices, the clerk, the tax office and stuff, of them having some time once a week, was very successful for them. They were able to get a lot of stuff done without being constantly in front of public. So that was good.
Yep, I believe it's, don't quote me, but I believe it's two Wednesdays a month. They're piloting and trying out a program where those offices are not open to the public until 10 a.m. so that they can get all of, their work.
Staff meetings and
Staff meetings.
go through processes.
Yes. So I think it seems to be not negatively affecting residents, as it was put out in the it's on the website, it's in the newsletter, it's posted when you walk in. It's so as far as I understand, we have not heard any complaints from residents, and it is allowing our staff to be able to work efficiently. And then one more, I feel, extended our lease with the Players Ring. The farmers market is all good. The street naming for Newbury Way, which is behind the old Newbury building, was approved. It has formerly been called Haven Court, and that will be updated.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I thought there's a Haven Court.
Yeah, so Haven Court is being changed to
Changed to
Newbury Way.
Newbury.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I said that probably in a confusing way. And I
An
think
alley.
It's an alleyway. And I think that is all. I will mention, we addressed the bird flu issue. The health department released the memo. There's a limited concern of in our region in Portsmouth but they are watching that. DPW is looking at some type of potential robotic dog or something to look at all the geese in Prescott Park and trying to. Peter Rice has been really great about going out with his dog. That's
cool.
But trying to figure that out. And then one thing I do want to mention that is we, on June 13th, will be honoring Dinah Whipple, who was the wife of Prince Whipple. She opened the first African-American school in, I believe, we think the country, but definitely the state. They obviously very important in Black history in New Hampshire. We believe she's buried next to Prince Whipple in North Cemetery. And thanks to the Dames and other people, we have raised enough money to put a headstone there, which is really great. And we've actually found through DNA testing relatives. And so relatives will be coming up. So June 13th, we will be the day before Market Square Day. We will be installing that headstone and having an event at North Cemetery at 1 p.m. And I think it's just a great new step of honoring tons of the individuals over the last several hundred years.
We also voted to bond $1.4 million for the Fernald easement at Bellamy Reservoir. It's bonded through the enterprise fund, so it does not affect the tax rate base. It is bonded because it's been mostly funded. The funds have been approved from federal and state funds, which may be in question. So we bonded that to.
There's been a lot of conversation with Nathan Lenny, our direct, and obviously the city manager's office, with concerns to any losing of federal or state funds. In a safety net, a broad safety net, this is one of the projects that we have agreed to bond in case. So the money's not been requested, but the bond has been approved. As a reminder, this is to acquire land next to the Bellamy Reservoir, which is where Portsmouth and several other communities gets their drinking water. It is developable land, and so part of it is within the city's master plan and guide to acquire and protect as much of that water source as we can.
This is, in fact, part of the watershed for the reservoir, so it's pretty important. Also, there's a public meeting for the bicycle and pedestrian plan, which was pretty well attended. It was on March 10th, and they presented the plan. It was good. Anything else?
One more, and then we'll be really done. We anticipate that there was just a public session on the Route 1 Corridor State Project. Again, that is a state project. We anticipate that there will be potentially another working session with that consultant group in the next few months. But the consensus is that there will be a multi-path lane on both sides of Route 1, potentially some small roundabouts, much like you'd see at Forest Corner in Rye, the Atlantic Grill. Or I always say a really good example of a good working roundabout is if you're heading towards Durham. But we are looking at that. there is some working of it because we know that one side of Route 1 is very heavy residential. And in that buffer, as I've learned as a property owner, the state and city owns some of that land. So trying to work at the least impactful way to make sure that we can make our city more in line with a walkable, bikeable, safe travel, especially that major corridor, with not having super encroachment on people's property. So those neighbors have been involved and at pretty much each meeting, at least like 5 to 10 of them. So there's been a lot of conversation with the state independently with those landowners. But again, this project will go from Ocean Road to Wilson.
Some of the concerns of those residents on Route 1 is that if it creates a continuous flow of traffic, getting out of their driveways becomes a real issue, as opposed to having traffic lights that creates spaces for them to come out.
It's already an issue getting out of McKinley.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Questions?
that's all I have.
Questions, and then we'll move it along.
Well, you raised something at the very end. Apparently, there are some discussions about consequences of losing funding state and
Yes.
federally, and what areas do you see that likely to happen, and how's the city going to respond to that?
So we've asked actually for a report back from the city manager and finance director, so we should see that in the next few weeks. It's not on this agenda, but hopefully it might be on the next agenda. Me personally, there's funding for education. There is infrastructure funding that is worried. There's concern, and right now we I know the DPW and the city manager's office are working on if the EPA goes away, what does that mean for our regulations, and how can we self-manage some of these programs internally that are kind of passed down. So right now, those are the big things. I think it was, don't quote me, but I want to say it was 3.6 million is what would potentially, if there was no federal funding right now, what would affect our current budget. Look at that. And then there's no foreseeing of what we haven't approved next year's fiscal budget yet. So, and then obviously state cuts trickle down. And there's departments that we use a lot of state revolving loan fund for water and infrastructure projects. And then obviously we know school funding. A big concern of mine is in 2 years we're up for the allocation of state funds for renovation of the tech school. And we know that the Department of Education is looking at severe deficits in the state. And we also know that the federal government has just come down and said they're not giving $80 million to the Department of Health and Human Services that was budgeted already in the state. So I think we'll see trickle-down effect for that. Everett, did you?
Yeah, on a much more local level. I was just going to ask, I missed this, it was probably a meeting ago or so. Mark McNabb had asked the city not to enforce the outdoor dining fee.
Okay, we forgot about this.
Okay. And I also, the second part of that question is that it didn't impact the rest of the outdoor dining policy.
Yes,
The chairs and tables fee, not
chairs
actual
and-
outdoor dining.
yeah.
The chairs,
Sidewalk encumbrance versus outdoor dining
Sidewalk
encumbrance.
encumbrance
Two
fee.
different programs.
So sidewalk encumbrance fee has been around for a very long time. It's $75 a table, $15 a chair, something like that. So those are for open public access, the ones not within barricades. The council, by a majority, me, voted to waive those fees. I think it came out to something like $8,200.
For all restaurants,
For
not just
all
for
restaurants,
McNabb.
but not for just McNabb, but for all restaurants. So I think a good examples are like Elephantine or La Maison, or the chairs that you see in front of
Series Bakery.
Series Bakery, my establishment. Well, we do the roped up one, but so those fees. I voted against it. I think that we have to be very careful as we look at, well, these are not major revenue lines. Every time you swipe away a $10,000 revenue line, a $10,000 revenue line, a $10,000 revenue line, you then can find that as a snowball effect. Again, this brought up the conversation of where it is the city, is the city responsible for creating some of these environments versus the private sector. I stand on the belief that the city, especially as we look through the master plan refresh and the city whole master plan, that the city can find ways, especially through, say, these $8,500 of funds that we potentially, revenue lines that we're losing, to invest in the public domain better. That was not the vote of the council, but the vote of the council was also to keep the outdoor dining, again, which is the roped off private areas, that fee the same. So this came from fee committee and then was very heated back and forth debate on the council floor.
It's also, I mean, those places that don't have fees, they still have to get a permit. I
They
mean,
still
it's-
go through the permit, they still have to have the insurance, they still have to have all the things. But I did bring
Breaking
up,
new grounds, those tables and chairs, I think, are
Yes.
Yeah.
the most iconic ones that you don't realize that restaurant has to
breaking new
pay
ground, yeah.
to put those tables and chairs
That is
out.
so old.
Napolitana, I said to think, the name has changed too many
Teddy's
times.
lunch.
Petty,
I think those are just like, you put them out there, but no, they have, I think it's $10 a chair,
chair, $50
$75 a table.
Yeah, but anyone can use
And
them.
anyone can use
Correct.
them.
And
There's
there's
public seating.
and I also think it's worth noting that the outdoor dining fee, the roped off fenced in areas, is May through October. These others are year round, so they're paying $75 a table, and much like Elephantine, they have, and I love them, they have customers that will sit out there if it's not a horrible day in December with a blanket and have
Yep.
their hot cocoa. So, yeah.
What was the, you know, why is the city giving up that, you know, and why are we,
This-
I don't understand the.
Everett, this was I'm Team Everett on this one. I had the same conversation. I think, you know, this was really led by Councillor Bagley and Councillor Cook with the idea that they want to make sure that they are not impeding on warm, friendly outdoor space.
Encouraging seating.
Yes, my argument is that these are the places who have always done it. There's, again, making sure that there's a conversation of the difference between outdoor dining and encumbrance, that these encumbrance facilities have always, done this. It's been part of their business model. I can't understand the reasoning. I don't see the reasoning as somebody who's been a downtown brick and mortar business owner who's paid these fees for 8 years now. I don't understand it. They're very low. They're very low cost. They're not impactful. We also, I think, worth noting, whether that is because they didn't feel the need to. Besides Mark McNabb, none of the other businesses that would benefit this came to speak in opposition or opposed.
So we're just giving up
didn't
revenue
care.
just because we do. Okay.
To be a
One
more
person
welcoming
in
community.
general.
Really.
So does this mean that any business can now just put an encumbrance without any fees?
Yeah,
Or-
well,
You need a
you
permit.
still have to
Besides
go-
the permit, but there's no associated fees
You
with
might
just putting
see
it
a
out
few
there.
more chairs in front of businesses.
Correct.
Which is good.
Yes, there also within that was the conversation of A-frame signs and things like that. So it's all encumbrance.
Well, no, you have to, the A-frame signs do have a fee.
Yes, so this was
If it's
the next
advertising.
part of the conversation was, well, does it make sense then if we are not charging for a table and chair, but we're still charging for an A-frame for a retailer or for another business or X, Y? So it's opened up a big
Yeah,
pan of conversation.
That's a sign.
Yeah, it's been it was the way that the permits are broken out. It's hard to break down exactly $642 is from chairs, $900 because they're all falling under encumbrance. But I agree with you that at some point
And how does the public differentiate between
The
what's
fence-
public and what's
the fence.
the fence?
So everything within the fence falls under the outdoor dining category, which then comes with the cost, comes with all of those.
Yeah.
And then Sean.
Well, you can't just go into a
Okay.
restaurant's marked off area and sit down and be the public. You have to patronize them versus Well, versus sitting in a chair that's out in front of the works,
Yeah.
your bagel. It's all about.
Not a bagel.
We're
It's all
separate.
about who controls the space. If the restaurant controls the space because they paid to control the space, then they can choose to allow their customers in and not the public, per se.
Yes.
I think that'll be a difficult conversation with the public and the person who works.
It's been this way for years. It's no different than it's
Yeah.
been for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Just waiving the fee.
I mean, we've always known you can't
Right,
sit and have a
right,
beer at
right.
your own beer at those little tables in front of
Yeah.
Napolitana. I mean, they're public tables.
Yeah,
They're not part of the
it's not a big,
restaurant.
it's not a big change for the public and for the
Nothing has changed.
businesses and for residents.
Yes,
So-
and the hope is if with the Market Square refresh, that there will be more public city-owned seating in that potential, you know what I mean? The
Right.
ones especially, if you look, when we get the, is a lot more seating at that central square, more tables in front of North Church, more tables in front of like where Starbucks is, that whole kind of
Yeah.
platform gets leveled out, changed a little bit, more on, like in front of State Street and Emmy and Me, or Emmy Lee. But I agree with you. Again, my concern is we have to look at where money's coming and where money's coming out, and as we look at the potential loss of revenue in an ever increasing budget as the way that cities operate, this to me was low hanging fruit.
Yeah, and this will come up year after year because there's a fee committee, but it is what it is. Because we've got some other stuff
Sorry,
here.
I'm inviting you next time ever.
No. Just one comment for the benefit of Jacob. I think you still have to have certain width of
Requirements,
free
yes.
sidewalks. You can't just encumber any open space in the city. So.
Sure, no, I get that. I was just wondering if it was going to take away from outdoor dining at all. If people are no longer paying fees, if they're going to say, oh, well, I don't need that anymore, I can just.
No, it's the same as it's always been.
Okay, just.
Yeah, because if you, the fees in the outdoor dining and fencing is if you want to serve alcohol.
Okay.
That is what that is. Which is very good.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, I think we spent as much time on that as the city council did that night.
I wish.
That sounds like a fun meeting.
Okay, so last
Running.
item on our agenda really relates to our task for this year, which is what our role is going to be in the master plan process. And just bring you up to date on what has happened since our last meeting, because it will somewhat inform our next steps. But I did have a long conversation with Rick Chelman, the chair of the planning board, following up on our presentation by Peter and Rick. And you recall at that meeting that Rick said that he wasn't sure what the process would be for creating what I'll call an economic conditions report or analysis, which preceded each of the last two master plans, and that he would welcome our role in updating that. And Sean and I discussed this at length and felt that we don't really have the expertise and the resources to do that on our own. Sean doesn't have that within his large office. And in order for us to play a role in that, we probably end up having to have a consultant assist us in doing that type of analysis, and there just is no money for that. My latest conversation with Rick, he suggested that he anticipated that the consultant that the city will hire to work with the planning board on the master plan will have to do that as part of its job, so to speak. And what that may entail is looking at the last master plan to see what was done and wasn't done, but also, the data analysis on, households and population increases and those type of things would have to be part of that pre-master plan process. So as a result of that, we kind of came up with what I'll think of as sort of a three-point plan to work with with the planning board. And I'll say that Rick is very open to our involvement and actually welcomes it. He's still trying to figure out exactly how the planning board will take it on. And a lot of it is driven by the style or the approach of the consultant, and because unless they've signed with the consultant since last Thursday or Friday, they have done that?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Yes.
All right, so the consultant is now on board? Okay, great. So here's what the thinking would be on how we can work with them. If the first point would be if and when the consultant prepares the economic conditions report, that would be the first step, that Rick will direct a copy to us in its draft stage and give us an opportunity to comment on it before it's presented to the public as a whole. In other words, not that we're going to correct it, but if we think that there are things that have been missed or because of the issues that we've dealt with over the last several years, we think there ought to be more emphasis on something, we'll have the opportunity to do that. We won't get to rewrite it, but we'll have a first review, if you will, concerning that. Second, when Rick anticipates that there will be an economic development section in the master plan. I hope each of you has the opportunity to review the last two master plans, because they've looked at what a master plan is in two completely different ways. The last one really focused on themes and then developed these in different sections, and the prior plan, 2005 plan, actually had sections on transportation, economic development, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So he's not quite sure how that will come out, but he anticipates that there will be an economic development section, and he's going to give us the opportunity to prepare the first draft of that ourselves. In other words, we'll be a step ahead. I don't want to say of the consultants, but of the process. So when it comes time for that section to be reviewed and performed, if we've done what we've been afforded to do, we will have something that will go to the planning board and the consultants for inclusion, and then they will work off of that. So we're, in essence, having an opportunity to do the first draft of a section. And we can talk about what that means and how we're going to approach it. And then if there is the third point really is if there is a steering committee or a public committee that becomes sort of an addition to the planning board, sort of what happened with the master planning for Market Square, that he will afford us having a representative or liaison to that board, whose role it would really be to sort of glean the issues that have economic development impact, bring it back to us, let us come and give feedback, depending on how the process works. So in essence, that would be that three-legged stool would be the approach that we would take to what we've identified as our priority for the year. So I'm interested if people think that's a good approach, and if so, then I'll let Rick know that we'll take that on. So, Sarah?
I think that's a great approach, and then this can be the foundation for what we focus on year to year as far as what our areas are. The question on the second part that I would have is it would be great to get a framework for that document from the consultants as soon as possible, so we understand like what kind of considerations they'd look to to have going into that. And then the second question would be if there is input or feedback on that economic development section, would we be expected to drive that through the EDC or plug into whatever process they'd have set up with the consultants?
Well, I think, I'm not sure, the last question, I think we're given the opportunity to sort of prepare it, but after that, it becomes incorporated into the plan.
Okay,
That
so
would
we
be
wouldn't
adopted by
expect
the-
feedback here on that section. It would be feedback through the process for the entire master plan.
Yeah, well, my expectation would be that, depending on what we said, that consultants, well, let's put it this way, I would expect that the planning board would probably like a presentation from us on whatever we provide them with, and be available for questions and answers. Again, it's got to be very fluid, at least at this point, based on Rick's thinking, which might mean, some give and take, but ultimately, it would be the planning board that would really be deciding what we had was good or bad or in between. And to your question regarding the format, I'm not, well, I'll follow up now that I know that the consultant's been hired, but in all the master plans, typically you're going to see sort of, observations about areas that could use improvement. The adoption of some general principles or goals, I should say, such as, wanting to have a diverse economy, not a single industry, or,
Conditions, priorities, recommendations, maybe some measures and tools to achieve those?
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, once this plan is adopted, it should give us a series of things to look at over the next decade. Questions? Comments? Coffee?
It's a big process. I think it's been encouraging to see Rick really try to get his arms around it on the front end. I'm glad the planning board will sort of serve as the vehicle, and that we'll have a seat at the table and a chance to sort of help with the framework of the existing conditions. Glad we can be a part of it, but it's not sort of solely under our purview. So
Yeah, no,
that's great.
no. The statute specifically says that it is under the purview of the planning board. In fact, I think there would probably be a question if the city said, well, we're just going to create a new master plan committee, whether they would be contrary to the statutory outline.
I would say that we're fortunate to have Rick as the chair of the planning board. I think he's pretty experienced and pretty on top of what we need.
I agree.
And I'll just say, Tom, I'm on the staff, with the staff group that meets, so we have another set of eyes and ears from an economic development standpoint.
Yeah.
I'm involved.
Yeah, and separate from all that, we are welcome individually or in representative capacities to attend any of the meetings that exist there and to raise issues as any other member of the public would be. I don't know whether this is true or not, but I anticipate that other groups such as the park, the arts committees, that type of thing, will want to have a similar role. To my way of thinking, the city has done a lot of planning and a lot of restructuring in the last half dozen years on a number of areas. And a lot of those areas were given a lot of emphasis in the last report, last master plan. Economic development was not given as much emphasis in that, and so I think it's sort of now's the time to put economic development up near the top of priorities. You were going to say something? No. All right, so then the question is, how do we approach this? Because I think we want to get started on this because we need to get out ahead of even the consultant. So when they're ready to deal with economic development, we have a product we can give them. We can, 2 months ago, we had thought about the idea of breaking up into 2s and 3s and approaching it that way. I'm not sure that is necessarily the best approach because I'm not sure how we would, I'm not sure what the subcategories would be that we would assign to each small group. And so I'm inclined to think we want to go back to maybe 2 groups of 3 or 4 to take on components, but I'm open to any suggestions on how to do it. Phil?
I was just going to say, I think recompiling that back in, I mean, Sarah's question on what does the current content look like that they're expecting us to deliver as sort of the framework, and it almost feels like, I think breaking it up makes it more manageable, but it also, maybe you're missing some of the connectiveness, so it might almost, I mean, a committee of the whole, I don't know if that's something we could do for like a separate side meeting, depending on time frame, and if we kind of had a set out agenda, might be one way to at least keep it a holistic discussion with the full group, with at least themes, or if we had a sense of what that document looked like, maybe decide if multiple groups make sense, but keep each group in its lane so we're not duplicating effort. And
Okay. So keeping that in mind, how would we develop the agenda, or what would?
I mean, I think looking at the existing conditions or whatever went into the prior master plan, like if it is transportation or economic development, or maybe, I think themes that are top of mind for me are kind of retail storefronts, commercial vacancies, makeup of the downtown, as a lot of projects get permitted, kind of maintaining that balance, and some themes, and maybe having Ben's view of what his constituency's dealing with. But I think maintaining or understanding what today's balance or challenges are and capturing that in the document, given the landscape. And I mean, I think you could probably take pieces of those, or transportation or other zoning changes that might have or have intended impacts that we want to capture. I don't know, it feels like a heady topic and a lot to cover.
Yeah, well, and it's a pretty big role that we'll be taking on, so I'm not sure how we're going to get our hands around it to do it efficiently. And again, I think we're probably going to need to move on it pretty quick. Now, we've got a guest here that I want to recognize, so he's not sitting around and waiting, but I'll give you a chance for you.
Yeah, I think to Phil's point, if we can develop the shared framework and then break out groups based on that framework, that'll make it more cohesive. My concern is if we have different people going out and looking at different areas, then how do you bring it all back together? So maybe it's establishing the themes, and then next meeting, these are the themes, and then who wants to take this, this, and this. And the themes are not just the areas around conditions, recommendations, tools. It would have to be closer to business growth and retail development or something like that.
Yeah, I think we start at the top with those
Yes.
larger goals. Ultimately, we would get to something like downtown vitality, but that might be part of
In context of maybe commercial and
different
retail
goal.
growth or something like that.
because I think the same, we'll have the same issues with other, for instance, should we be looking at repurposing commercial offices, things of that nature, or allowing for multi-uses in those areas, including residential? Do we have to worry about giving up too much to residential so we don't have any ability to grow in those other areas? So
Are we creating the format? Are we designing it, or is the consultant going to give us a
I think the
format?
consultant will give us the format, and we plug into it
Okay.
based on our areas.
Yeah.
Which, if it's like the previous plans, should be,
When do we get that?
that was my question. If we can get that, then we can figure out what to
Right,
plug in the
exactly.
structure.
But we really can't do much without it.
Yes and no.
I mean,
So-
we can
so I-
think about it, but
Well, but here's the thing, whatever the format, there'll be a formula for making recommendations, and they'll start at the top with, what are your goals as a community in the economic development area, and, the in-between level, which gets specific of, what areas can you make changes in to accomplish those goals? And ultimately, the third one is, what are your action items? What are your actual strategies to get to those goals? And then, as Sarah
we did a
said,
fair amount of that brainstorming at our retreat, so maybe that's,
Well,
Revisit.
exactly. Well, it's interesting because I don't know, as I went through these master plans again, I was thinking some of the ideas that were in here, we crossed off our list of things to look at. But ultimately, we're going to end up having to get back to them. So I guess to move things along for purposes of, I'd rather not wait another month to come back and have a conversation on the assumption that I'll learn something from the consultant before then. What I would like to do is start developing those themes, which are consistent from every 10-year report, and are really consistent with economic development as a whole, such as, if one of the themes is to have a diverse economic community, business community, then I'd like to identify that and at least have our themes done, our goals done, and some initiative, and some, thoughts about how we would accomplish that in different areas. Instead of just waiting another month and having this conversation again. And so I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get to that level? How do we start the ball today instead of waiting for,
well, the retreat, we could start there and see what ideas we floated around. And because we were kind of thinking that way, at the retreat about what do we want to do, what do we want to accomplish, how can we do it?
Yeah.
So there might be some major themes out of that.
well, and there are. And so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, how do we take that? And that's why I was suggesting sort of smaller groups in order to come up with a product that we can put on the table as a whole at our next meeting and at, each of our meetings.
I think Phil, before he left, said he would chair the subcommittee.
You would do the first draft?
Yeah, I think that's what he was.
All right, well, I do, we're also going to lose Sean here in a minute because he has to travel to a meeting. So I guess what I would ask, at least individually, I guess, is I'd ask that each of you sort of put, pen to paper and make a list of what you think, what you think the goals ought to be, what we think the goals ought to be. And I think what that means is looking back at the last couple plans, which are hopefully have all done, determine whether the goals that are in there are still valid, or whether those don't need to be goals anymore because we've successfully addressed those in the last decade. And then, and not have to be comprehensive, but really come up with some recommendations under each of those goals. And then circulate that to Sean. And I will, Sean and I will compile them before the next meeting and have something that we can work off of, but understanding that what the final product will depend on what the consultant says the format's going to be. But at least, if we can all agree on what those larger goals are and some action steps we can take, and I think if each of you, we'll probably have a good list of recommendations if all 10 of us are thinking about it from a different angle.
So to keep it manageable, do you want 3 to 5 goals from each person for next meeting to discuss?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe a week before the meeting, so you have time to compile them, consolidate them?
Well, how much time do you need? I'd ask that question.
Get a month.
Give me a deadline, I'm good with
All
deadlines.
right, well, so is 2 weeks too soon?
No.
No.
No?
No?
All right, so 2 weeks from today? Okay. In some ways, this is going to be like filling in Jen's survey that we did before the retreat.
And just clarify the final question, just so that we have it, just so in 1 or 2 sentences. What are we trying to answer?
Say it again?
Just clarify the final question for those
3 to 5 goals
Yeah,
for
on-
the
on-
next master plan with tools or opportunities to support them
Great, thank you.
in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Sent to Sean.
Okay. Then I will welcome our guest, our illustrious mayor, who is a busy man. He's got another committee he's got to be in after this one, but he seemed to join us.
Well, I just I wanted to take a few minutes at the end of your meeting. I didn't know that Phil actually had to get to work. We could have done it earlier, but there's just a couple of gifts for you, Everett, and I know that we're going to celebrate you in front of the entire city who watches on Channel 22 on Monday night. But just for 25 years on this board, the work that you've given to Prescott Park Arts Festival, the Chamber Collaborative, it's just it just speaks to what community is, and that you have been so committed to this community. It's really hard to put that into words, and it's not going to help, with the coffee cup, but these are fantastic coffee cups. I drink out of them. They take a patina after a while with the...
Can I see?
Yeah, it's just after 25 years, you all get
Buy
these.
them, they're a revenue line item.
And second, I joke when kids get these, that they get you out of parking tickets until you're 16, but you can test it out to see if it works. Passed. And then we don't, if we had keys to the city, you would certainly get one, but we are the city of the open door. And as such, we don't have keys, but we have door stops. And I don't know, it's really hard to, open doors, and you've opened a lot of doors for a lot of folks, and many of them would not have realized that. And you've kept the doors open for a lot of folks. And so just want to thank you on behalf of the city of Portsmouth and for all your colleagues here for setting such a great example for community service and what it means to be a citizen of Portsmouth.
Great, thanks, David.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
You can keep the bag if
The bag is good.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Everett.
Thank you, Everett.
Thank you.
Appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you doing? Just wondering why you're dressed up.
Okay, well, is there any new business?
Okay, I didn't know.
Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all for coming.